going on, guys? You might be able to hear it in the background, but today we're going to be diving into the idle issue on my Skyline. So for some reason the car is acting super weird, and this is how it's idling. So when it comes to messing with the idle on these motors, if everything's working correctly, you should be able to just adjust that screw right there, and that'll change your idle. However, as you saw, the screw is pretty much all the way in, and we still have a super high idle. Another thing I tried is we have a hose clamp on this hose, and I wrapped it in wire harness tape because I thought that it was leaking maybe, and thought maybe that would help it. Didn't change anything. It turned out that having the regular spring clamps, they weren't clamping enough on these silicone hoses, so that was my leak. I still have 2 more spring clamps that I need to change, so I'm going to be changing those today too. What we're going to start with is cleaning the MAF. I'm pretty confident the MAF is good. I had a bad MAF before. It wouldn't rev past 5,000 and the car just kind of ran like shit. Threw this one on, we're able to go up to red line, which is perfect, and everything should be cool. And I didn't have any idle issues after putting this MAF on. For some reason, I only had the idle issues once I threw everything back together after taking it apart to discover what that ticking noise was, which if you haven't seen that video, definitely go check that one out. So I'm just going to pop it off and I'm going to spray it with some MAF cleaner, and we're going to let it dry and then throw it back together, see if that fixes anything. If that's not it, then I want to take off this pipe and I want to take the throttle body off and I want to clean that out, and then we'll have to reset the TPS most likely. But we're going to start with the MAF. So if you're going to be cleaning your MAF, you have to use mass airflow sensor cleaner. You can't use brake cleaner, it will mess up the sensor. You can pick this up at any auto parts store, it's relatively cheap, and on the back it tells you how you're supposed to use it and the directions. Essentially what you're going to do is take it off completely, because you have to make sure it's not plugged in. So just take the MAF off completely, it just makes it easier. So you're going to spray right down in there, that's the sensor in the center of the screen. You're going to spray that 10 to 15 sprays, and then you're going to let it dry for like 10 minutes or so. So it's been about 10 minutes, so now we're going to throw this MAF back on, start the car up, let it warm up, see if it does the weird idle thing. So one thing that I guess you're supposed to do when you mess with the MAF, if you change it, clean it, whatever, you're supposed to disconnect the battery and pump the brakes and then reconnect the battery. I think the idea behind it is you're disconnecting the battery to reset the ECU, but there could be some residual power left over somewhere, so you press the brakes so the brake lights come on, and that'll just drain the power completely. So when you reconnect the battery, the ECU should be reset. I've seen it in a couple forums, I had a couple people tell me to do that. That's what we're going to be doing. I don't know the exact reason behind it, but that's what makes sense to me. Because our battery's in the trunk, it's super easy for me. I just have a little breaker here, so trip that, and then we'll just pump the brakes, and then we just reset that guy. So now, put the key in. Ignore my RPM, sometimes they like to freak out and do all kinds of things. Okay, took a little bit to start it that time, but now it's idling around 1700, which is a normal cold start. Let's see if it changes though. Okay guys, well it's still doing it, so wasn't the MAF. So now let's try some other stuff. So that sucks, that didn't fix it. I was kind of thinking that would happen. But now we're gonna do is take the throttle body off, and I'm also going to be taking that pipe off so we can get underneath to get to the cold start valve, because I have a hose on there that has the regular spring clamps, and I think those aren't sealing. If they're not sealing, then we're getting extra air in, and that's causing our idle to freak out. Okay, so I just discovered something. I think that my throttle cable is adjusted wrong. It seemed like when I pulled the throttle cable off, the throttle plate closed more. So that might be my entire issue, but I'm still gonna pull the throttle body off because I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get it on the camera. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but right there, there's this little thing there that I can't seem to move. So I'm gonna pull the throttle body off and clean it out because it's definitely dirty. Okay, so false alarm. This is from my old throttle body on the blown motor that had a shit ton of blow by. You could see on this one too. Hopefully you can see anyways. So you guys can see right there in the center of your screen, it has the hole as well. I think that leads to this port, which leads to the charcoal canister. Also noticed on the paper gaskets, it blocks this port, and I would always try to keep this port open with the RTV because I thought that it led to here. But I'm thinking now that it's okay to have this blocked as long as the throttle body is clean and we still have airflow coming through that port. So I just cleaned up the throttle body and I have a paper gasket. So I was going to use some gasket maker, but I found this paper gasket and it's going to work perfectly. Before we throw that back on though, like I said earlier, I want to address these clamps. So let's take them off and put the worm style hose clamp. That is exactly why those clamps suck. One landed right there, the other one somewhere in the garage. I have no idea where. Those things are terrifying. They could hit you in the eye, hit you somewhere else. Thankfully it missed me, but trying to get some real clamps with these. When I bought this kit, it had an option to add hose clamps, but it was like 60 bucks more or something ridiculous. So I was like, I'm not gonna spend that much money just for hose clamps. When I had this motor out of the car, I probably should have replaced them all with hose clamps anyways, but I didn't, so now I'm paying for it. So just discovered that the throttle was being held open. Right here is a little screw. You can use it to adjust idle. This is the throttle body that came out with the blown motor. The throttle body that's in the car, I never messed with. It was just one of the throttle bodies that I had just lying around, so I just slapped it on. Didn't even bother to check that, and that screw was holding it open just a hair. As you guys saw in the video, you could see just a tiny bit of air on the bottom and the top, but that's still letting air through. So that's been adjusted. So now we can throw everything back together and see if that's fixed. And we're gonna have to adjust the TPS because I had set it with the throttle cracked open slightly. So I'm gonna have to readjust that. So one thing you want to do when you adjust your throttle cable is make sure that when it's fully open, it's not super tight. You want to have some play in it because if it's just like super tight, then it's putting too much stress on the throttle cable and it could snap. I know it's a problem in drifting, so it's just one little thing to look out. This is my daily, so I don't even drive it that hard, but it's always good to make sure that that's not going to snap. If you're like me and you don't have friends, you can put a bar on the gas pedal and have it go up against the seat and that'll do it. This is the bar for my floor jack. So before we start it, I just want to adjust the TPS sensor and make sure that we have that set before we start. So setting the TPS is pretty easy. You need a multimeter that can measure lower than 1 volt. We're trying to set this to 0.48. The way you set it is by turning this, so we'll have to loosen these screws so we can adjust it. But you're going to want to put a paper clip or something into the middle wire on this plug that's coming off the TPS. And you're going to be putting one lead from your multimeter on here, the other to ground. I'm just going to go to here, that's where the factory ground is. And we want it to read 0.48 volts DC. So we're going to see where it's at right now, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have to adjust it. So as you guys saw, it was at 0.45, so we had to set it to 0.48. It's very sensitive on how you move it, so you have to move it just barely, but it's pretty easy to do. I'll leave a link to this exact multimeter. I just got it from Home Depot. It's like 40 bucks. As you guys saw, that one for sure can read as low as it needs to. So now that we have everything put back together, we're gonna start it up. All right guys, here we go. Right now it's at 1,000, and that's what I was talking about that my cluster likes to do. So that's very helpful right now when we're trying to figure out what the car's idling at. Oh, there we go. 1,100. That's where I want it. Preferably a little bit lower, but I am very happy if it stays there. So we're gonna let it run, and we're gonna see if once it gets up to temperature, if it messes up again. I have a feeling that it's fine, but I just wanna make sure. And look at that, now we're doing a launch. We got our launch control at 4,000. But we're not building any boost. I've been told that's a ground issue, so I'm probably gonna check that out. It also could be a bad cluster, so that kind of sucks. But everything else on the cluster works fine. Definitely sounds quieter and feels way better. So I think it's safe to say that the idle is fixed. This video is not going to go up for a couple days, so I'm going to drive the car around and make sure that nothing changes. If nothing changes, the video is about to end. If something changed, then get ready for more content. So that's going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Really glad that we got it fixed. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.